Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's planning committee. There are no fire drills planned tonight, so if you hear the alarms, do swiftly follow us out the exit. The agenda will be taken as in the order paper, and we'll have a short break after an hour and a half if as needed. So those in the room, please do take water because it can get hot. And I'll just outline the process for those who are new here, but also those watching online. So each item will follow the same process. So officers will present the application and reference the modification sheet. If we do have those speaking on the item, it will have objectors first, then ward councillors, then applicant and agent if there is anyone speaking or objecting. Then officers' response, who may reference previous answers from technical briefing. And we'll take 3 questions at a time from the panel. What we have also implemented is the panel has the opportunity to ask the applicant and objectors questions, and these are factual nature. So please don't add any additional padding or lobbying on our part. So we'll try and keep them as closed questions as possible. Then we'll move on to comments and general observations before having potentially debate if any conditions may or may not be applied. And then we'll move to a vote, starting with those voting against, not voting, and then voting for. So we have received apologies tonight from Councillor Bim. Before we move on to the main item of business, have there been any declarations of interest? Oh, yes, apologies. Councillor Simon McGrath as well, and Councillor Matthew Willis is subbing. Apologies. That was my fault. Sorry, yeah.
Forgive me, I think I probably should mention, I think everybody knows anyway, that both these applications are in Hillside.
Excellent. Thank you very much for drawing that to our attention. So minutes of the last meeting, can I have a seconder? Yep. Ed, go for it.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to say, in my professional capacity in the property world, I do know Marcus Beale. In a professional capacity, it won't be any surprise, but it won't have any bearing on the meeting, but I thought I'd just say it. Thank you.
Fair enough. And while we're dotting our I's and T's, I know Marcus is part of our design review panel as well. I saw him yesterday. Cool. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've done that. We have a seconder for our minutes. So we'll move on to the first item of business, which is P2446. So that is the Brogle House. Tim, if you want, David, if you wouldn't mind introducing this item.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item is Brogle House on St Mary's Road. This application has been brought before committee due to the number of objections which have been received. The application site comprises Queen Alexandra Court, which is a purpose-built complex managed by Royal Homes, a subsidiary charity of the SSAFA, the Armed Forces Charity, and provides self-contained residential units for members and former members of all ranks of the British Armed Forces and their families. The complex of buildings is Grade 2 listed and is located at the southern end of St Mary's Road in Wimbledon. The site is bounded by St Mary's Road to the west and Lake Road to the east. Brogle House itself, which is located at the southern end of the site, is a later addition dating from 1970 to 1973 and provides ancillary accommodation for the site staff as well as some guest rooms when required. The application site is located in the Merton Wimbledon Hill Road conservation area, and currently off-street parking is provided to the front of Brogle House. The site has excellent public transport accessibility with a PTL 6A, and it's also located in a controlled parking zone. There are also a number of trees located on the site which are protected by tree preservation orders. The proposal itself is to demolish Brog Hill House and erect two 6-bedroom detached dwellings. The dwellings will be arranged over 4 floors with a basement, ground, first and roof space accommodation. Each dwelling will have 2 car parking spaces at the front. Just want to go through the plans. So this is the ground floor site plan. As you can see, the houses are staggered. So for the purpose of this, the house on the left is the west house, and the house on the right is the east house. So as you can see, the east house is staggered behind the west house. That's the basement plan. And this is the first floor plan to the east house, first floor plan to the west house, second floor plan to the east house, and second floor plan to the west house. As you can see, the houses are on, just because of the gradient of the land, the houses are on slightly different levels. That level was taken from basically the access road height. So another reason why the houses are on different levels is because the east house is set further back, where there's also a change in ground level. That's from the rear. That's a side elevation, I think, of the east house, and a side elevation of the east house again on the other side. That's a view of the houses from the access road to the north. That's a view from Lake Road. That's from St Mary's Road, and that's from Woodside. I mean, as you can see from those elevations, you can see the scale of the houses in comparison to the blocks of Queen Alexandra's Court behind. Here's some photographs. That's from St Mary's Road. That's the existing car access gates from Lake Road. That's the front of Brogwell House. So that's taken from the access road. That's the access roads. You can see the southern block of Queen Alexandra's Court to the right. That is taken from just inside the car access gate on Lake Road, looking up towards the access road and the southern block of Queen Alexandra's Court. And that's the existing sort of allotment garden which residents currently use. Consultation responses, including letters of rejection and support, are set out on pages 4 and 5 of the agenda. In terms of planning considerations, the principle of the development is supported, as it would provide 2 family-sized houses, which would help contribute to the council's housing targets. With regards to design and appearance, it's considered that the proposed dwellings, which would be subordinate to the residential blocks of Queen Alexandra's Court, are not excessive in terms of size. It's considered that the dwellings are sympathetically designed with hip roofs with a similar profile to the existing blocks. The proposed facing materials comprise slate roof, red brick, and stone-clad bay windows, which would be similar to the materials used on the existing blocks, which means the residential dwellings should integrate well with these blocks. It's considered that there would be some impact on the setting of the listed buildings sited to the north. However, it's considered that the impact would be at the lower end of the less than substantial harm scale. It is, however, considered that the public benefits would outweigh the harm, with the proposed development resulting in a net increase of 2 residential dwellings in an underused part of the site, whilst also sustaining the work of the SSAFA and the Royal Homes in Wimbledon. In terms of neighbour amenity, it's considered that a proposed development would not be visually intrusive or overbearing, whilst the applicant has submitted a daylight sunlight report demonstrating that the impact on daylight sunlight levels to neighbouring properties would be acceptable. It's also considered that the impact on privacy would be acceptable with some windows in the upper floors of the north elevation of the houses obscure glazed to prevent overlooking. The houses will also provide an acceptable standard of accommodation, complying with minimum space standards, whilst also providing good levels of daylight sunlight and outlook to habitable rooms. The proposal is also considered to have an acceptable impact on traffic parking, flood risk, and trees. With regards to the latter, a number of new trees are proposed to be planted around the site to enhance biodiversity. Members are therefore recommended to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We'll go straight to committee questions, and I'll take three first off. So we've got Susie, Jill, and Matt. Susie.
Sorry, I'm struggling with the microphone tonight. I have a few questions. I'll try to keep them short. First of all, I think I misunderstood something right at the very beginning. The gates, which are called the fire access gates, are next to pedestrian access pair of gates, the big stone gates, but the actual access gates are the big steel gates in your photograph. My understanding is they're kept permanently locked, except when emergency vehicles need to use them. So other vehicles don't use them to access the site at the moment. Can you just, have I got that right?
Sorry, David. Yeah, let's get to more in Jill and then Matt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Interesting that you mentioned the fire path, and I just wondered if someone could clarify whether that fire path will be kept clear during all building works, because clearly it is an important matter. But also, I've got a number of small things. Have we been provided yet with a method statement in terms of safeguarding the current residents during the period of building? Also, have we resolved the issues of lack of bin storage, or is there bin storage and bike storage been now put in? And the loss of the gardens and allotments, which, given that I live in a similar standard of accommodation, is very important to the well-being and welfare of such residents, is that going to be looked at and somehow ameliorated? So it's a lot of questions.
Oh, fair questions. Matt, and then we'll round up.
The modification sheet has gone away to suggesting there could be a like a condition about future use, but with 5 of the 6 bedrooms having connecting bathrooms, what safeguards can be put in to prevent this being let out room by room as an HMO or converted into apartments?
All good questions. So in reverse, what guarantees can we put in place, safeguards rather, about it being converted to an HMO? Jill's point about fire access, but also about bin storage and the allotments, and also the method statement. And then going back to Susie's point about those fire access gates, and if they continue to be locked in this current iteration.
First question, yeah, regarding the existing use of the gates, I think the applicant might be able to advise on that.
I'll call you guys in at the end if there's any, if we don't know.
With regards to bin storage, what we usually do is condition, if it's not shown on the plans, which would condition that the bin storage is the details are provided. But I mean, obviously with a scheme this size, with the amount of space around each house, I shouldn't see an issue with that. The loss of the garden, we've already had discussions with this regarding the applicant. One of the questions from one of the councillors raised that, and the applicant has been in discussion with residents regarding re-provision of it. Yeah, and what we can do if councillors are concerned about making sure that the re-provision is acceptable, we can always agree that either through other officers or with the chair or the councillors. Yeah, again, in regards to the HMO potential, if councillors have got concerns regarding that, we can condition that permission would be required to turn into HMO.
Before we go to the applicant, can I just loop back in? Jill asked about the fire path. Do you understand? Do you have any details on that for a minute?
Yeah, can you just repeat that question on that? Sorry.
Yes, I was just concerned if that fire path is part of the access to the building site, that we have a condition that ensures that it is never blocked at any time by plant or whatever. And I did also mention about the method statement in terms of safeguarding the residents during the build because of frailty, loss of sight, hearing and disability.
I think we've, I think it's in the mod sheet where so as part of the method statement will include that. Yeah, and again, with regards to the construction method statement, we'll make sure that fire access isn't blocked at any time.
Super duper. If I can bring the applicant in, sorry. If you can introduce yourself before you speak, that'd be great. But really good just to hear a point on the fire access in relation to the gates and their use, please.
So I'm Mark Innes. I'm development manager on behalf of SAPA, so representing the applicant. In terms of sort of safety, it is obviously vitally important. The gates, there's two sets of gates into the complex. The one that's adjacent to the new houses, it is occasionally used. Sometimes it's kept there locked for security. The intention would be that their houses would use that to access it, but they don't have rights across it. We've created parking spaces within the houses, so all they do would cross it, and they wouldn't have any rights to park there. There's also a pedestrian gate for a route. We've had our traffic engineer look at it to check the adequacy of it. There's, you know, the amount of movements will not cause any problem, and you know, we're completely, our client obviously wants, you know, owns the rest of the scheme. Safety is paramount, and they will put in place all the safeguards to make sure that, you know, there's no compromise.
Mark, can I just come back with you on that one? Just understand when you say that particular house will use the gates. So they have key access, or are you thinking of changing the setup of the gate? How does this work?
Change the gates to make them so electronic gates, so that you know, they can, you know, key fob, open them, drive in. The gates would then shut. So
essentially, these are still private access gates, and they're not accessible to the public in terms of keys or anything at all.
They prevent sort of members of the public going into the wider site, but those gates would be shared with the main complex and the houses, and you know, they would work adequately in that manner. There'll be any compromise to it. As I said, they would just have rights across to use it, but they wouldn't have any rights to park in it. It obviously wouldn't be in their interest either to park in that way, because you know, they've got their own parking.
Thank you for clarifying that, Susie. And anyone else in this next round? Susie.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the traffic situation, if I can put it that way. If we could impose a condition which involved keys, the only people additionally able to use it would be the residents. So it would be the residents and emergency vehicles. The two other things I have been thinking about, looking at the layout of the exit gates from the West House. It's very close to the end where there's a sort of pedestrian corner. And of course, there's another way out of the Royal Homes on St. Mary's Road further up. So I wonder whether it could be made a condition that anybody who visits the two new houses does not turn left out of that access gate from West House. So they're only going, if this is what is ultimately decided, towards Lake Road. And the residents, I have to say, would prefer it the other way round. But what I don't want to see is cars moving into an area where you have not great visibility and lots of very vulnerable people accessing it.
Okay. If we can ask David to come back on that, and it may be helpful if we could bring up Google Street View or something just to see that if we do condition that, so we actually can understand that in detail. But before we do that, good if we can just bring in the applicant briefly to ask factually, is that a possibility in terms of your plans?
That's fine. Our intention is that both houses would use that one gate, and we can obviously control that by the rights that we grant, the legal rights that we grant them, and also in practical terms of fobs. I think they would use it because it's the closest, you know, it's the closest, most convenient for them as well. So it would seem obvious that they'd do that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. While David brings up Susie.
One more, with apologies. One of the things which isn't clear to me, in order for these houses to be built, that little complex of maintenance houses, maintenance sheds and so forth, is going to have to be moved. And my understanding is it's going to be moved to the area around the lodge to the north of the site. And I'm presuming that that is also either grade 2 listed or part of the curtilage of the royal homes. So one way or another protected. And I don't at the moment have an image of how it's going to be relocated adjacent to the lodge without causing harm to the setting.
I think while David pulls up the other other image, can the applicant answer that question? What would be the approach you take to preserve the setting while, of course, moving the sheds?
So the answer to that is that actually the stores are not particularly well used, and also as part of this change, the way that the applicant is going to try to sort of manage the site, a lot of things that might have been done on site will be contractors brought into site. So it's not that we need to replace all the space that's lost.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Dave, are we able to bring up that street view at all? Of the point Susie was raised in terms of turning left, coming out.
Yeah, so this is the access road between the southern block and the northern boundary. I just want to point out, as you can see, there is currently an access there from Broghill House. So the only difference here with regards to the access road is that the access point is just been shifted a bit further to the west. Broghill House has 2 parking spaces as it is. The new house will have 2 parking spaces, so there should be very little impact in terms of pedestrian safety. I also was point that the access is still a bit of distance away from that that corner on the southern block. So myself, I don't have too much concern regarding safety in that respect.
Susie, with the image on the screen, do you just want to briefly talk through your condition?
Yes.
And just colleagues, unless there are any more questions, we can move on to comments and give Susie the brevity she needs.
If you're looking at that picture, what we're talking about with West House is an opening. In fact, I think there might be 2 openings, not without the diagram in front of me, further towards the end of that. So you're near the area by the bottom gate, which is used by pedestrians. And I don't totally share the officer's confidence that this doesn't present a risk. And it might be helpful. Thank you. That's what I wanted. You can see that there are 2 exits there, one for West House and one for East House. And they come out just before that corner. And I think personally that represents a risk for the residents of this set of homes because they are so vulnerable.
So you absolutely, can I just clarify then, Susie? So what we're saying is when they exit the site, out those gates, you would want to condition a turn right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they don't go anywhere near the main site.
Fine.
The alternative would be the proposal that I sent through, which residents would prefer, which is to do it the other way around. But either way, I want to minimize the amount of vehicles on the access road and the amount of movement on the access road to protect the residents.
Got some nods behind you. David, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the point I made before. Yeah, it's if I just show you the current arrangements. So you can see from Broghill House, there is the access point there. So yeah, as I said, it is slightly further to the east. And then when you compare it to the proposed arrangement, it has been shifted to the west. I don't have an exact measurement in terms of distance from that corner, but I think you can kind of get a view, kind of gauge sort of the distance by looking at the car. So it's not, as I said, it is closer to that corner, but that's what my view is that the safety issue, it shouldn't present too much of a safety issue.
Chair, having listened to the discussion and the commitment by the applicant, I would suggest that a condition goes on about the access arrangements to show that, and that be demonstrated in the legal agreement between the applicant and the occupiers, that will be the access arrangement, and for that to be evidenced to the council, and for that condition to be retained.
Thank you very much, John. I think Susie, you also mentioned about a condition relating to who has access to the gate itself, and the applicant has mentioned that only those living in there would have the keys, so to speak. Is that provide you the reassurance you need?
That provides me with some reassurance. It doesn't totally answer all my concerns, but it would mean that everybody in a van doesn't suddenly start accessing those gates, which goes some way as well to protecting the children, because normally the 2 schools on this road and children pour down it, and normally those gates are closed, so there isn't a problem. They just walk past them. Whereas if they're suddenly open, there's a real risk to hundreds of children. So I think the idea of the residents of the houses having fobs, so only they can access them, goes some way to meet that, quite a long way to meet that. Yes.
Good, fantastic. Any other conditions? Dan?
Can we add a condition about, because I am a bit concerned about, and I think Councillor Willis made a fair point about the bathrooms being attached to the bedrooms. It could one day in future be seen as a ripe site for development and used as HMO. So can we add a condition removing permitted development rights, turning it into that would allow development easy ability to turn to HMO, and if they wanted to do that, they'd have to come back to us, the planning committee.
I don't see any reason why we can't. Does anyone have a counter argument? No. And John, do you want to come in on that?
Just to come in, Chairman, that condition is absolutely possible to remove those permitted development rights. That's straightforward if members want to add that.
Brilliant. Okay. Anything else we've missed in our deliberations? Anything? No, Matt, go for it.
Are we going to hear from the conservation officer about it, or was it just in the report?
I'm more than happy to, and there wasn't a direct conservation question. I think it's only fair since Jill's come down all the way. Do you want to give your a view on this? It was really good reading your review of the application in the papers as well.
Yes, certainly. Yes, the first thing I'd like to say is that the building that is currently there and we're going to lose has no great architectural value. It was built in the 1970s. Not that there wasn't some excellent stuff built in the 1970s, but this is not one of those buildings. So the loss of the building has no major bearing on this. We did have a pre-app on this some little while back, and what was submitted at that time was really not suitable, particularly the roof form. So they reviewed what they were presenting and have now got hit roofs and roofs that more relate to the listed buildings and other buildings in the area. What they did originally submit was quite fine buildings, but really Art Deco design and not appropriate for this location. And also because of the roof form, they interfered with views of the listed buildings, and now with the design that we've now got, this allows views between and around the proposed houses, so that we now can those views have been retained. The other issue about the loss of garden, that will be addressed under condition 23, that they will have to provide another area for the residents to use. Trees will be planted to replace any lost trees, and efforts, particularly an effort's being made of adjusting the design of one of the houses so that one of the trees will be protected. I think that's basically what I've got to say, unless anyone's got any questions.
Thank you.
I'm happy with the design of what we've got now.
No, thank you. And actually, you've prompted me about trees. I mean, I had a view, I mean, reading the reflections the Wimbledon Society provided as well, about conditioning the grade of trees, or at least the type to be provided. In your opinion, is that something which is proportionate to the site, or David's view as well? It'd be good to hear.
There are listed TPO trees on the site. And we're not losing any of those as far as I know, as far as I understand. So the trees that are being lost are 2 fruit trees, I think, which always saddens me because I like fruit trees. However, they're easy to replant. And as I say, new trees are under one of the conditions are being put in, I think it's condition 13, that's covered with the planting and landscaping.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that no CPO trees are going to be lost. 2 category C trees and a category U tree will be lost. If you look at the proposed ground floor site plan, they've annotated where they wish to plant trees. Yeah, I would just also like to point out that 4 trees are proposed to be planted at the north end of the site, so this should act as a sort of soft boundary edge when viewed from the south block, and some further trees are planted elsewhere around the site. We can, and we have done in the past, if council minded, we can require that trees are semi-mature, and then we can ask for a minimum girth of trees. That's usually something like 18 to 24 centimeters or something like that, but the tree officer would be able to advise on that. So yeah, we can do that.
If colleagues would agree, we can condition semi-mature trees to be planted. Yeah, nods, good, fantastic. Susie?
Can I raise one more? I don't think it's been discussed yet. Can we condition a 5 mile per hour speed limit on the access road?
I think that's an interesting proposal. Can I just ask the applicant, would that impact any maintenance or any other operations that are going on?
It wouldn't impact, and you could have that. I mean, how you'd enforce it. I suppose the other thing I'd point out, the distances you're travelling, you're not going to get up to very much, but even if you try to, you wouldn't get up to very much speed. And obviously it's not in the interest of the houses or the residents. So I think
I take your point. Does that provide you reassurance?
Not totally. I'm a believer in doing whatever can be done. So rather than leave it to the good discretion of the individuals, I would like it to be 5 miles an hour and signed.
Is that with the understanding that there wouldn't be a enforcement regime around that, say?
Difficult. I don't know how it would be enforced, but it would still have psychological impact. Got a big sign saying 5 miles per hour. And I hope that would improve the situation.
Yes, I think, Chairman, the enforceability of that is an issue for us. I think we would have to ask the applicant to put that signage in place and give that commitment and to accept the submission of that under a condition. I'm afraid I'll have to pass that over.
Okay. Does everyone agree 5 miles? Yep. Cool. All right. So moving on to voting on this item. So do shout if I've missed a condition, because we've been adding a few. So we've got the access arrangements, terms of turning left, and that will be in legal agreement. We've got a condition about HMO, so it's removing permitted development rights. We've got semi-mature tree installation, and we've got the 5 mile sign, be it with the understanding enforceability will be will not be possible, but it's more for psychological impact. Have I missed anything out? Matt?
Working's already.
That's already
number
in the
10,
mod.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
That's
a
fine,
nod.
just checking.
Good point. No. Cool. All right. So if that's how if we're taking that as amended,
Sorry.
yeah.
Have we met Jill's concerns about a construction method statement to protect the individuals on?
That was in
living
the, yeah, done. Yeah, good point. So with all that wrapped up, can I have those voting against the application? Not voting?
Chairman.
Voting for?
Seven, Chairman.
Fantastic. Okay, we passed the application. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much for coming and answering our questions. Appreciate it. So we're going to move on to our next application now. That is a regularization and an extension, and I think Tim is going to introduce the subject matter.
Forgive me, before we leave Broghill House, one thing we didn't condition was the key.
I think they've made a commitment to do that verbally.
Can it be guaranteed?
Well, why don't we've passed on that item now, but why don't we loop back, and I'm more than happy to write to them and ask them to write to us as a committee just to confirm what they've said. I think it's only fair, but I've got confidence what they've said will come true, but I appreciate it's always good to have it in writing.
Thank you.
Phone's not working. Oh yes. Yeah, I think Susie, I think the best thing to do with those specific requests is we'll go away, we'll ask them to put those to us in writing, wrap up a condition around that, and issue the decision on that basis. If there are any problems, we will come back to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Members, so this application is a householder application to extend the property. The site is located on the north side of Ridgeway Place. It is a new build semi-detached house. It's part of a development of 4 houses. You can just see here on the location plan the site with the other 3 to the southeast, all largely built of similar form and design. This is the existing house at the moment. So as constructed, they sort of built in sort of single-story style additions as part of the original construction of and design of the houses. There's a basement below this house and the other 3. The proposal itself, so it's for a single-story rear extension to the property. The extension would have a sort of a feature zinc clad roof with smooth render to the elevations, and also a green roof on the flat top with a roof light sort of set slightly lower down on the lower down side. The other part of the application is for a basement. So you'll see in the planning history that the 4 properties were built under the same consent. In 2018, the developer came back to vary the original consent to extend the 2 middle houses basements deeper, as you can see on this plan here. So this plan was the approved 2018 variation plan. But what has occurred is that the developer built the basements under the houses on either side and squared them off. So following discussions with officers, you'll note an application was withdrawn recently where it was for a single store extension, and myself and the case officer noted that the basement below it actually doesn't benefit from a consent. So the application before you tonight is for the single store extension above and to regularise the basement below it. So looking at some of the elevations above ground, as I said, smooth render, glazing on the rear, and so more of a sort of contemporary approach to the design. There is some zinc on the rear of the four houses, mainly on the dormer windows at the top. So at basement level, so stairs would come up to inside where the proposed extension would be at ground floor level. Some site pictures from the case officer. So here we have the rear of the property, as I said, inbuilt sort of single-story rear addition. There's slightly different levels on site. So this site is higher than the adjoining terrace as built, and then on the other side, number 32 is on higher ground still. So the extension essentially remodels this existing one and comes out 2.8 meters on plan from the rear wall, and would be 0.2 meters higher than the total height of the existing. So you can see just that currently number 32 has had a recent extension done, showing the slight difference in rear building lines at the moment. And that's a view of the rear garden on site. So members, you'll note in the modification sheets, following a number of questions received, mainly on email from councillors following the publication of the agenda, the case officer has gone back to not only the applicant side of things, but also our flood risk officer to help answer some of those queries. So that's those there for you to note. So overall, Chair, officers satisfied in plain terms that the application can be accepted and recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I think we'll have a fair few questions just trying to understand the building control issues with this application versus the planning issues, but I've got probably a few of them myself, but I'll open the floor to questions. Does anyone want to kick us off? Susie, and then Susie. Yep.
Right, I have a couple. The first one relates to flood risk, and I appreciate that the flood officer has said there is no risk, but all the neighbours say something different. So I am concerned about it. And the answer is that, it's here somewhere, that a sufficient and appropriate drainage will solve the problem. I forget where that is, but it's in this. There doesn't appear to me, unless I've missed it, to be any specific new drainage plans. All we have, the structure report, is basically the old structure report from 2015, except that it says at the end, it's possible to conclude that the methodology of basement construction noted in this report has provided a safe and effective method of excavating and constructing the basement without significant impact on the public highways or neighbouring properties. Now, everybody here knows, because they've all seen the pictures, that number 32's wall fell down and its foundations were exposed and had to be repaired, and liability was admitted. So against that background, I'm slightly concerned that there doesn't appear to be anything specific to make sure that rainwater is attenuated and drainage is properly dealt with, particularly given the fact that apparently there was standing water found between 1 and 2 meters below ground level, and this basement goes down to 3.5. So I think there is an issue here. It's greatly concerning the residents, and it doesn't seem to me at the moment to be addressed.
Can I add a part B to that question, Tim, about how I appreciate the points notwithstanding you made in your opening statement. What conditions, and Susie's point, what conditions would you see appropriate to give further confidence on this? I've got a few ideas, but I just want to understand from your experience, how would you proceed?
Thank you, Chair. I think looking through the history, so the 2018 application to extend the two middle houses deeper, slightly on the basements. Having reviewed that application, there was no extra requirements from the flood risk officer for that application in terms of drainage. So the flood risk officer was happy with the 2015 drainage plan, and bearing in mind it was I think it's about a 2.8 meter deep extension to the basements. They were happy overall that nothing extra was needed. And so having again been involved in this scheme in terms of re-reviewing it, again, they're happy that there's nothing extra needed. So from our point of view, Chair, we're happy with no conditions required on the drainage aspects for this application. And that's, yeah.
How do you, I mean, I'm preempting your question, Susie. How do you then cross that with what we've seen historically with, the actual flood damage or water damage rather?
Chair, I mean, with any construction project, clearly this one, there were issues there in terms of proximity to the neighbours, but it would appear that may have been resolved at the time. But in terms of this particular application, there's nothing further we can really add in terms of drainage. The basement's already there.
Is there no what further investigations or reports can be provided that we haven't already got that would illustrate that this is I assume Susie's going to ask that. So I thought I'll ask on her behalf.
Not really sure. I mean, we don't obviously normally put on conditions for drainage on single story extensions. But perhaps given the concerns, perhaps the post completion of the works under this application for the sort of final drainage details which have been implemented to be provided and approved by us for review of our flood risk officer could be a way to help mitigate this.
Susie?
Can I say the problem with the water in this particular application is not just whether there is ingress into the basement, which appears to be hotly disputed, but also what's happening in terms of displacement. Because if the water is running down from the common to Dundonald, which appears to be the background to this, and you've seen a local resident has said he has twice been asked because workers there identified to deal with water issues where the underground streams are. So although there doesn't appear to be a record of them, it appears they do exist. Against that background, if the basement is indeed successfully sealed in the way the architects say it is, then the water has to go somewhere else. And I think we need to be looking not only at the basement itself, but at what the effect is on the houses around it in terms of water displacement. And I don't know how we do that, but what I have, as everybody's seen, is multiple letters from people saying there are problems with water and this is a disaster because of that.
Matt?
So we have three things here, don't we? We have building control, we have planning enforcement, which I'm much more confident with now than has been the case in the past at the council. And we have today's planning application. And I suppose what I'm concerned about is the fact that we're being asked with this single story planning application, I can see why, to go back and approve something that's been done essentially without permission. And so my question is really about precedent. Is it going to be the fact in Merton that you can just build something with no permission, come back later and then get it weighed through for the purposes that it's already there?
I think that can be answered from several points of view, but I think I'll answer that one. But as chair of planning, I think ultimately what I understand in this case, and I'll ask Marcus and others maybe to comment, is this wasn't included in the original scheme, and therefore this is a regularization. and that came about when the pre-planning service was consulted, from my understanding. So I think we should be very supportive of mistakes and regularising those. I think your wider point about building without planning permission and consent is absolutely right, and that should never happen, whether it's innocent or not. And I think we need to divide up between those who do it maliciously versus those who, through an administrative issue, may not have included this in their plans. But I'm going to ask Tim just to add some context on that, because there's a bit more information I know he has, and I may ask the applicant to come in and just to cover why in this case we are here today because of this, what happened. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I've been in touch with our one of our enforcement officers looking at this site, and there was an enforcement file opened up in 2018. Then following that, the application came in, which was the 2018 plan, which I showed there to extend the basements deeper. However, the file was closed in 2020 with a note on our records that permission had been granted to resolve the issue. But it would appear that perhaps amongst that, during the construction process, the developer obviously squared off the basements rather than just did the two central ones. So unfortunately, that officer no longer works for us, so I couldn't speak to him directly. But that would appear what's happened. I think the good news is that I flagged it with the case officer when the first submission came in recently, which was withdrawn. So it has been picked up now and looking to get resolved.
Thank you. And I'll just bring Marcus in on adding any further details he can about Matt's point in the sense of how this scheme managed not to be included in those other basements.
So the developer, as you correctly observed, effectively squared off the basements to make it easier to construct. They put in an application to regularize this, but they still extended the outer basements. So we advised them either to apply for permission for the outer basements or to block them off, and neither happened. Now, the developer then went into receivership. The contractor went into receivership. I should stress, we were not administering this contract. It was a design and build contract. So they sort of took our drawings and did what they wanted to do with them. There is a lot of unevidenced assertions from the neighbors. I mean, there are leaks, to my knowledge, there are leaks in 2 of the terraces of these 4 houses. And they're associated with walk-on skylights and the way those were waterproofed. I've seen no evidence of any leak to the basement walls. I've seen no evidence of flooding or saturation or underground streams or any of these other things. And I think the problem is, as a professional, when I say something to you, I have to be able to support it with evidence, and objectors to schemes don't have that same discipline. So we must refer to the engineers, I think, on that.
Thank you,
but
Marcus.
the reason it was built,
thank you. That's really helpful, providing that context and your professional opinion on the water ingress as well. Susie?
Can I change the subject slightly? I think what Mr. Beale has told us we can deal with in submissions, but turning to the bundle given as a memo by yourself and looking at the pictures associated with it, I just wanted to ask the officer about a couple of these. At page 6, there's a mock-up created by, I think must be the people in number 32, saying that the extension is 0.93 of a meter from the fence, and I don't think that's in dispute. They've created an image and say that this would block any early morning sun. They have a north-facing garden, so any sun at all is very, very important. And looking at page 6, is it your view that that's a reasonable image, first of all, of what this would create?
Yeah, I'll ask Tim to, do you want to go in, Matt, while Tim is orientating himself?
Yeah, so it's pretty much related, which is it might be for Mr. Bill, it might be for exactly what was just being said. Page 13 of that, do you have the what was sent to us? That image is obviously not acceptable for what we would normally see in regards to the property line, and I'm wondering if our team can and actually maybe the architect can confirm whether that is what it would look like, bearing in mind the gradient of the road and the plans in regards to how far it comes back.
Thank you. So that's page 13 for you. Got that one?
Yeah.
Chair, we do get images put to us all the time, sometimes from objectives showing mock-ups. They are difficult to give a lot of weight to because they are adapted photographs. All I can really say is really have a good look at the plans to help you judge this. As I outlined in earlier, the overall height is increasing by 200 millimeters. I think the key thing with this is what's shown here is, yes, it's one view from the neighbour's patio, but what is material, what we look at is actually the width of neighbours' gardens. It's a fairly wide garden here, and also the depth is reasonable, and we do get a lot of single story extensions on the boundary, whereas this one is actually still set in from the boundary. So that's really my advice on that.
Tim, is it fair to say that generally, you know, I think you've referenced it a bit, but it may be worth expanding that when you take consideration sunlight loss or indeed increase, you're taking it from the perspective of, as you say, the garden. There may be aspects you want to take from maybe, you know, the bedrooms on the second floor or things like this, but the reality is you're taking it from the house as the whole. Is that fair, or do you want to add a bit more just to give us the context of understanding where a neighbour may think differently, whereas actually from material planning terms, we're looking at it from a different angle?
Yes, Chair. Yeah. So one key thing with this is the difference in site levels. You can see from the photographs provided actually that you can see I think it's page 9 in the submissions that it is a lot lower down than the neighbour's property. Single story extension as well, as I said, it's off the boundary, and looking at it in terms of how much it breaches the real building line, I think it is about 1.4 meters beyond, and so really it's overall judgment is sort of made in that sense. As it is single story, we're satisfied that there would be no harm to light.
Fair enough. I think we've exhausted light. Susie, you had a final question?
It's more of the same. Let's not call it light. If we look at pages 55 and 58 of the original pack that we've got, having looked at them, I need some clarification. I'm not sure that I understand, but looking at page 58, it looks as if the parapet on top is 2/3 of a meter of itself, 0.66. The gap, if you look at it, between the figure given for the bottom of the parapet and the figure given for the top. So I don't really understand how this is only going to be 0.2 of a meter taller. In fact, the other way around, it looks to me, and it looks to the neighbours, as if this is going to reach the ground floor window of the neighbour's house, and therefore this drawing, I don't understand how the two marry.
I think that's a fair question. Tim, can we bring that page up? I think it would be helpful to explain, and then we can maybe ask Marcus to comment as well if it's helpful. And then Susie, you can just elaborate your point. I appreciate not everyone on the committee sometimes can get the diagrams, and there are a lot of lines on it as well. You don't just want to zoom in on that. Yeah, that's it. Zoom right in. if you can. Normally, if you press Control, is it Control Plus? In. So, Susie, just elaborate again while Tim is.
Just looking at that in the context of page 55, the other one, the sort of hand-drawn sketch that we have, it looks to me, taking page 58, as if the parapet, which is showing, is 0.66 of a metre above the existing structure, which is more than 0.2. So there's something I don't understand. Sorry.
Chair, if I may. So I will bring up the existing plans in a second, but I think the existing structure actually is this parapet here. That is the height
Right.
on. If you see the picture on page 8 on the submission, if you see the sort of left-hand corner of the extension that's existing, that is that bit there. So actually that's why it's a little bit confusing with the plans. They actually drop the height on this side, but at the same time this sort of feature roof goes up.
Mm-hmm. So how much greater is the feature roof to above what's already there?
That's 0.2 meters. So I got the case officer to measure that today on plan.
All right, thank you.
So,
I'll just bring Marcus briefly. If you could stick to the numbers, that'd be helpful, please, Marcus.
So it's quite correct to say that we've dropped the roof. We've dropped the roof on the left-hand side. That's because we were extending a little bit further back and we didn't want to compromise the window of number 30. On the right-hand side, we've gone up by 20 centimeters. You will see that the garden of number 32 is about 1.6 meters higher than the application site. So the top of the roof is only just above head height. You can see the little figure drawn on the back of number 32's terrace. So there is really no, and the mock-up, by the way, that you have on your screen is completely wrong. I think they've perhaps taken the whole depth of the extension rather than the increase in depth of the extension. So
thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Susie, does that provide you with the?
No, I think I'm grateful for that information. I have a clearer picture.
Good.
I still have concerns about the impact, even if it's only 0.2 of a metre on 32, simply because sunlight in their garden will be so important, given that it is north facing. And the other issue, which I picked up from Tim, the 1.4 metres greater, I think it's, I may have misread the documents. I thought it was going to be 2.8 metres longer than the existing structure. Is that right?
Yes, it is. That's right. That's right.
Right. Thank you. So from the perspective of number 32, that's a significant amount of building which isn't there at the moment. Sorry, that's probably not a fair question.
So number 32 has an extension that breaches that existing building line at the moment with the subject property of this site. So there's already that stagger, and this one will go a bit beyond.
Thank you. No, that was my understanding.
No, right. Okay, I think we've exhausted the height of this particular extension and boards and perspective, and it's really interesting to just flesh that out because it is about perspective from different angles. Of course, aren't there any further comments or questions anyone wants to add? No. Cool. I'm happy to. So, do we want to just? Are you, Susie, in terms of conditions? Would you, Tim mentioned about conditioning about the flood and water, etc. Is that something that you would support?
I think I'd like to say that I have continuing concerns. Looking at the reports that we have, they all say there wasn't going to be a problem. That's what we were told last time. And then we were told in the most recent report that there hasn't been a problem, although we know there has. And we know, for example, nobody knows what remedial works have been done in the last 5 years because MBA weren't on it, Structure weren't on it. The only people in a position to comment are the neighbours, and we've seen what they have to say about it. So that causes me quite considerable concern. Second to that, we know the terraces weren't properly built on any view because MBA say the terraces leaked because the damp proofing and the deck on the deck terrace and skylights was incorrectly executed, but it was signed off in October 2018, and presumably it was inspected at the time. So none of these things give me any confidence at all that there won't be problems again. And I'm not sure how best we can address that, given that there doesn't seem to be an additional drainage solution of any sort or attenuation of any sort in the plans that we have. And I think there is a risk of this going horribly wrong, which we need to address.
Can I then suggest, so I think, I mean, Matt mentioned this earlier about this application has several particular issues on it, regularization, the application itself, but also the building control issues. I mean, I would be supportive of some mechanism where yourself and your ward colleague will be more involved in those building control issues, because ultimately these are the plans, and the next stage is kind of out of our hands from our perspective. But it's important that you have the confidence that they will be done insofar as you can support residents. Is that something that you would be interested in taking advantage of?
I'd be very happy to use that, but I have to say that at the moment, I'm not confident that we have a way, given that nobody is acknowledging that there is a problem, of protecting the neighbours against that problem. I'm interested in this suggestion, but what would happen if problems do emerge?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I would use the powers I have to make sure that building control seeks a resolution to that. I know John can probably detail in a lot more about the ins and outs in the process, but I think, you know, we all want to see something built to plan and something that works. And if it fails building regulations, then it needs to be right, as we know. If that provides you the confidence, and we can run with it from there.
I have to say, I'm very sorry. That is very helpful. And if this is passed, which I'm fairly certain it will be, I'd be very grateful for that condition to be there. From a personal perspective, on my reading of these papers, I am still not convinced, but I have a suspicion I'll be alone in that. So I'd be grateful for that condition.
Jill, and then Michael.
Thanks, Chair. I have to say that I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the neighbours. And I am only too aware of what it is like to live with the risk of leak flooding into my premises and having no control over that. And given these residents have experienced some quite considerable stress, and whilst I am obviously not a PhD in flood risk or technology and all that, what is it that we can do to reassure Councillor Hicks and these neighbours that we will ultimately be protecting their best interests too? Because ultimately, you know, we could say, no, we're not going to pass this, but it's going to come back. And I don't believe that necessarily these poor neighbours are ever really going to be completely 100% convinced, despite, you know, my learned friends, the architects behind me, and I don't distrust their comments at all, but if I was one of those neighbours, I would be, as they say, bricking it.
Michael, and then I've got to round up and suggestion.
I must admit, I share much of Councillor Hicks' concerns with regards to flood risk. If it were my preference, I would like further evaluation of the flood risk. But as it does appear we're going to a vote this evening, I'm not certain I can support the application as it stands.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So just recapping in terms of conditions, what we've heard tonight. So, so it seems like Susie's in agreement, and if colleagues are in agreement, we would have a condition where both Dan and both ward councillors will be involved in the builder control aspect from the purpose of providing reassurance and understanding to neighbours. Is that agreed?
Check with you, Chair. It's you know, we're in a sense we're giving responsibility to the councillors to make decisions that maybe they're not duly qualified to be able to make, and what kind of kickback would that potentially bring upon a councillor and the council? I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the reading of this.
Yeah, so we've done that several times before, particularly in the conservation area in Wimbledon. What that basically effectively means is we are delegating the authority of the committee to councillors who are empowered by the council. They will then be our eyes and ears, so to speak, on this, because we can't be everywhere. And we have to be mindful of the wider committee agenda. But if there is a concern or an issue, they will raise it up in the usual way, and that can be a call-in if the condition isn't discharged effectively.
Thank you. And thank you for that. I can't obviously speak for my co-councillor, but if this goes ahead, then I would be happy to participate in that. The second thing is a comment made by Councillor Butcher, which I do agree with. I think that I hear the assurances of the architects, but in the context of everything I have read, I am not confident that there has been adequate investigation of the flood risk in terms of displacement as well as in terms of the buildings. And one way of dealing with that would be, instead of making a decision tonight, to defer it and require further investigations.
That's a very good point. I think we could achieve the same outcome if we condition it, and then by very nature of it, it's not, if the condition isn't been carried out, then call it back in.
That would also work. Yes, thank you.
Cool. Is that so? Sorry, Tim, you mentioned before when we're talking about flood risk and water ingress, etc., about asking for those plans before building commences. Could you just elaborate further on that or that mechanism?
Really, Chair, it was about almost like a post completion. So it was more like a sort of a post completion sort of drainage sort of survey or details to be submitted. So I think one of the key issues with building control, you see, is they can use private companies rather than come to the council. So that was just a condition there, Chair. But actually, the condition you've already put on about the sort of, it would capture the sort of building, you want to capture sort of building control aspects anyway. That could fall within that condition. So,
okay. Is there anything that is there anything that would be worth addressing now in just before the spade goes in the ground, so to speak, that would provide further context on that? Is there anything further? If there isn't, just say.
I don't think there is, Chair, to be honest, given the flood risk officers looked at this in detail, so no.
John, and then we can wrap up.
I think the alternative, Chairman, is rather than a deferral, because I think the issues are very clear that members are concerned about, and the committee have given us some really strong direction and a really clear steer on what it is that you want to see. The alternative is to delegate, for the committee to delegate the decision back to officers for further investigation around those particular issues in consultation with ward members and yourself, so the decision does not actually go out until we reach agreement on that. The risk is the applicant has the right of appeal if we do not determine the application, but and then again there's a risk for the applicant that the appeal may be dismissed. We're here to work together still, and even though it might take a bit longer, I think if we were to take those issues away, discuss them with the relevant officers and the applicant, the ward members and yourself, and subject to those being resolved, then the committee authorise the issuing of the decision.
Martin and then Matt.
I think what Mr. Berry says is obviously eminently sensible, in terms of the delegation. I don't think in terms of the flood risk, we obviously have discussed that tonight, but the evidential base is fairly limited, although this evidence has been presented from some people. It has not been completely substantiated, but clearly it does, warrant, further, I think, investigation by officers and through delegated decisions. So I certainly would myself, as a planning committee member, be in favour of this approach. And I do believe we should make a decision on this one tonight and not defer. And I will be supporting it subject to those conditions.
Thank you, Matt, and then we'll round up.
Similar to that, and also a comment, I think it's very clear that the architect has spoken well and wasn't involved in any of the stuff that's gone in the last few years regarding the site. I feel slightly uncomfortable combining the sort of basement and the single level in my decision making. One, because I feel one way about one and one way about the other, but two, because I don't think they are the same. And so with all that in mind, and since I think we've made our point, I agree that it should go back to delegated powers, because I think that they know much more about this than me in both those areas. And if things are addressed, then I would be happy to delegate that choice. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So just to round up, we're moving to a vote, and the two conditions we're adding on are, one, that ward councillors will be, we're going to delegate our authority, our observation power to the local ward councillors to observe the building control process and report back any issues or concerns they have, and that's part of sort of post, that's part of the construction process and post build review. And then before that, we will then delegate authority to ward councillors and myself to further review the concerns about water ingress and flooding, and subject to that, approve the application via delegated powers.
Yes.
Correct? Cool. All right. So let's move to a vote with those conditions on. All those voting against?
None, Chairman.
Not voting?
None, Chairman.
Voting in favour?
8, Chairman.
Excellent. Fantastic progress. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, the applicants. Marcus, I appreciate your time and energy and feedback. Thank you very much. So moving on to our next bit of business, I think we're going to have a review of our plan and appeal decisions. John, would you like to just give a brief overview of those new plan and appeal decisions that come in, and particularly some of the ones we're taking to the next steps with our legal powers as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Tim will just talk through one of the appeals. Committee will be familiar with the other ones, actually, and then I will cover enforcement.
Thank you, John. So, members 27 Cochrane Road, appeal dismissed. So, Inspector found in favour of us as a delegated decision. Essentially, it's a scheme to convert and extend the house to 3 flats originally. They then came in. We get this quite a lot under what's called a variation condition application to change the design and change aspects of it. But they, in our opinion, they were watering it down quite a lot and sort of making it not as good. And actually, so to the point that we thought it was visually harmful, and the inspector agreed. So it's a good decision for our design policies. John, you can talk about the benefits.
Yes, and the other appeal, Chairman, it's a page there. Was the Bennett's Courtyard? Yes, of course. That was also on page 6, and of course that was essentially well, that was heavily influenced by the committee, Chairman, because of subsequent progress around the scheme, and so that appeal was actually withdrawn, despite being previously refused by the committee in light of the more recent scheme coming forward. So, good outcome. And in terms of enforcement, so the enforcement report starts on page 61 of the main agenda. And I think it's caught your eye, Chairman. I think the most important statistic at the moment is we've issued one new enforcement notice. We have two other. We've got a planning contravention notice in play. We've got a temporary stop notice drawn up, and we've got instructions to legal as well. And what instructions to legal means is that we've decided to take enforcement action. And what we do then is we justify that on planning grounds. We instruct the legal team what we want them to do, what type of notice we think they should serve, and the details around it. But it's actually legal who draw that up. And an example of a scheme that we're just progressing at the moment, a notice that we're just progressing at the moment, is detailed on page 63. And this has been a problematic site for us for years. This is the land to the rear of 42 Tamworth Lane. We've done some really good work around that lately, because it wasn't long ago that we were taking quite a bit of criticism in the press from neighbours who'd become a bit frustrated because we had served a Section 215 notice. We had the land cleared. This is a piece of land for which we've previously granted residential permission. That's not happened. It doesn't look like, for various reasons, the owners are going to bring that forward. And so what's happened is the site wasn't secured off. And even though we had took direct action and got some contractors in to clear it, it wasn't long before it was fly tipped again. And that's going to keep on happening. Now, it's not, our remit really is to clear up untidy land. But what we've done is we've worked with the antisocial behaviour team, who have special closure orders, and the site is now temporarily fenced off. Through our building control budget that we would use for things like dangerous structures, we are now funding more robust and more visually attractive hoarding to go around the site. We've got the closure on there. We got that through court. We want to get the land cleared. We want to get it completely sealed off so that nobody can even put stuff through the fencing. Good progress has been made, and to back that up, what we will do then, because the court order and the closure is only a temporary measure, but we don't expect to make a great deal of progress with the owners given what's happened in recent years. So what we then need to do is follow this up with a further untidy land notice, but not only about keeping it clean and stopping it being overgrown, but also to require the owner to reinstate the fencing that was once there, and also rebuild the garage that was on the site, which is currently a load of rubble in a corner, and reinstate it to what it was. So we're going through that process at the moment, and that's one of the actions that we're taking. And you know, I think the residents are much more satisfied with progress now. We've got some other notices that are in progress in terms of the instructions. You'll recall a meeting or two ago that we had the Streatham Road car wash, and that site, we're now facing a site with unauthorized buildings, with an uncertain land use history that's never been demonstrated. A lawful development certificate hasn't come in. We've not had an appeal against the planning application yet, but we are currently preparing stop notices, a temporary stop notice, and then that's only for 28 days. So to stop any activity on the land, and then we'll serve an enforcement notice, and we're looking to cover initially the period that the applicant does have to appeal, and then we'll see if an appeal comes in, and then we'll take it from there and review it. So that's another one we're looking at. Legal are looking at a breach of condition for us. It's around, we have these from time to time. This is Hartfield Road in Wimbledon, 162 to 164. It's a development site, and we've had all sorts of problems around the construction management plan and a breach of that condition. And so we'll be serving that as well. And oh yeah, and there was one more. We've got in High Street in Wimbledon, we've got a property with unauthorised roller shutters on, which is in the Wimbledon Conservation Area. That's not acceptable to us. We don't think they will get planning permission. So we are serving an enforcement notice requiring their complete removal. And legal are working on that. So really good progress. You know, we're taking quite a hard line with these things, and it's happening. It's just not that quick. So that's the drawback. But you know, we've got steps to follow. That's the law.
Amazing. I've got some hands up. I just want to say before we come to people that it shows the amazing joined up working you and colleagues are doing, but also, you know, some particular attention to detail for conservation area as well. So really, really good stuff, and good stuff we're hearing it as well. Martin, John and Susie.
Can I just ask, who is the owner of the land at 42 Tamworth Lane? Because I do think they should be named in public session.
That's a good question. There are multiple owners. I can't name them all off the top of my head. They are detailed in the instructions to legal services. I think the names may be displayed on a previous notice from what I recall. I will check what information we can release on that. But yeah, it's in multiple ownership, and that is one of the problems actually, that it always takes longer.
Yeah, and I think obviously in terms of the other case, in terms of Streatham Road, I mean, this has obviously been ongoing a number of months. I remember when I was planning cabinet member before earlier this year, Councillor Kirby obviously was very active on this, and it's just dragging it out month by month, the whole thing there. And you know, there are very serious concerns. I'm obviously glad that action is being undertaken, but obviously it's regrettable they're trying to play the system on this one.
Yes, although an appeal's not been submitted, they have also engaged solicitors. So yeah.
It was an interesting letter to read, just put it that way. Jill.
Yeah, I think this is just a sort of comment how impressed I am at the responsiveness over these situations. And I certainly have recently been in contact with the team about concerns in my ward that have been going on for well over 15 years, and how grateful I am on behalf of our residents that actions are being taken. And I'm looking forward to some really wonderful changes, certainly in what is a very wonderful conservation area that's blighted by people who buy properties and don't realise what they should be doing with them, and then let them sit and rot. So let that be a message to anyone watching. Don't do it.
Get it clipped for Twitter. Jill's coming for you. Susie.
First of all, can I just endorse what Councillor Manley has said? I have found the planning department and the building enforcement department really helpful and constructive over the last few months on various issues, for which I am very grateful. And the second one, just a little question, because I think it'll be of interest to the people who live in my ward. Which is the building in the Wimbledon Conservation Area? Which business is it?
Tim.
It's at the top end of the high street, just before the common opposite a pub. I can't remember what the pub's called, but it's quite a large unit.
Sorry, did you say it's a pub?
But beyond the Dog and Fox.
Beyond the Dog
further
and
down
Fox.
there on the left. You got, it's a 1970s.
Rose and Crown. Thank you all.
It's a 1970s building, and it's the ground floor units there, and the shutters go down both sides.
It's yes, it's a 6-story building. I have it noted here somewhere. Just bear with me.
But also the shops have never existed that both the signs are there for. So there's a lot of questions about that on the high street.
Have I got this right? This is the thing which is
It's
Fair and the ice cream, Wimbledon Fair. So the building which used to be LK Bennett and has been empty for ages and ages. Right, thank you very much.
It's called Parkside House, and it's 52 to 54 High Street.
Right, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Really good feedback to hear as well. So it's good
Yes,
we've got
thank
that on
you.
the record. Finally, I just want to draw everyone's attention to our decision log. So we're going to start, we've started this up partly because of our use of de-delegated power to a certain degree, but also through things like the new call-in procedure, where things are decided outside of committee, but it's important to bring it back in here so that everyone's aware and we've got a record. So I just want to flag for this committee, officers suggest to take in an application. So the application number is there. You're welcome to review it. But I made the delegate decision as chair that the application was only very slightly different than the previous application, and again it was in order to regularize an issue. So because of that and because of the issues were no different, that it would be conducted under delegated powers, and it was then proceeded to be approved as an application. But anytime there's anything like that, I will make sure it's included here as on the decision log, so it's full transparency. And when our outcome of our second application tonight will also go into this decision log at some point. Yep.
Chairman, just to add to that and to reassure the rest of the committee on the same point, the previous application had actually been to appeal, and the differences were so marginal it wouldn't really have given you anywhere to go in terms of defending another appeal. So that was a really strong material consideration that I brought to the attention of the chairman, even though we'd received objections. There just wasn't a great deal of wriggle room.
Thank you, John. And, I think we've all seen, particularly tonight as well, the balance on some applications, which on one end there is a clear cut bit and then there's others, there's a bit of grey. And in all this is why we are here now to make these decisions and things are delegated to us. So, yes, thank you very much, everyone. Is there anything else? No, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone.